Carl, it's timing is everything. Not that I mean, you and I speak so regularly that and there's things are always changing. But I thought it was important for this conversation. Actually, it was funny. I reached out to you a couple of days ago, and it didn't really dawn on me till yesterday. I mean, we'd already scheduled this, but it dawned on me. I was like, oh, this will be good because you've talked about prior in our conversations your feelings towards Pam Bondi, and I'm wondering
Yeah.
if you wouldn't mind going backwards and sharing what your opinion of her it was and is prior to her becoming the Attorney General of the United States.
Sure. Well, my my involvement with her had a lot to do with the fact that she was, of course, AG in Florida. That's her, her prior position, if you will, before Trump appointed her in the United States Attorney General. And I was heavily involved in the Libertarian Party uh, during the time period roughly coincident with the economic crash. Okay, so I mean, not exactly, but sort of in that same general time frame.
Are you talking 2008, Carl?
Yeah, this was in the in that time period. Okay, and the thing that was interesting about this was that during that period of time, I got myself elected to the executive committee of the Libertarian Party. I went to one of their conventions and they had an open seat. I stood for election and was duly elected at the convention. So that made me an official EC representative for the party within my district, and I was I was an at-large member. So as a result, we did the usual Robert's Rules of Orders, monthly meetings, discuss the various matters that that bore on the state party business. And like all political parties, you may not be aware of this. I think a lot of people aren't. Anyone can run under a party banner. Okay, so I can decide that I want to run as a Democrat. As crazy as that might sound with my espoused political positions, I can run as a Democrat. And the party cannot stop me from doing that. The way the law is structured, the party does not have the ability to issue a veto against somebody who runs under their banner. So what this means now, what they can do is sponsor additional people or encourage additional people to run against you in a primary, of course, all right, which they will do if they don't like you. Um, but we had a gentleman who was contending for the state party, a state seat in the legislature where the Trayvon Martin thing happened. And it was a situation where Zimmerman was jumped by Martin and he shot him, killed him. And then Pam Bondi, along with a bunch of other people, tried to have Zimmerman thrown in prison for murder.
Which
And
let me interrupt you, Carl. That was all. This is okay. So let's go back to the Martin
Mhm.
Zimmerman story here for a second,
Right.
because I don't quite exactly remember all that. When was that approximately?
I'd have to look the exact date up, but it was during an election cycle, and what happened was that Zimmerman lived in a subdivision. He made a habit of patrolling it. There had been burglaries and
2012. 2012.
yeah, yeah. There had been break-ins in there and other nefarious things that were going on. Um, People that were believed to maybe be dealing drugs or whatever have you. And so he was essentially doing a neighborhood watch kind of thing, even though it was unorganized. And in Florida, you have the right to defend property and your life, of course. This we had a stand at the time. We had a stand your ground law in Florida. Okay, so if you are attacked, you have the right to meet force with force, including, if necessary, deadly force. And under the law, you had the right to do that. So he was in the process of paying attention to what was going on around him, and said that Martin jumped him, that they got into a fight. He jumped him. Martin hit him, knocked him down, and then got on top of him and was pounding his head against a concrete sidewalk. Okay, so basically mounted him after he had been knocked down and was on his back and was in the process of essentially trying to kill him. All right, so he wasn't satisfied that he'd beaten him in a fight. he kept going. And at this point, Zimmerman pulled a gun, which he had. Martin attempted to contest him pulling the weapon, as you might think he would do. Well, he lost that one. Zimmerman shot him, and Martin died. So Zimmerman, his position was that was self-defense. My head was being bashed against a concrete sidewalk. I had, if I did not shoot him, I was going to die or suffer a great bodily injury, which is the standard for self-defense. Pam Bondi attempted to railroad him straight into prison, including suborning what was pretty clearly perjured evidence and testimony, a person who supposedly was Martin's girlfriend that clearly that was questionable. There was an attempt to cover up the fact that there was objective physical evidence that Zimmerman had injuries to the back of his head, which of course, if you get punched in the face, your nose might get broken, you're bleeding, whatever. The back of your head does not have an injury on it. His did. The local media, along with Pam Bondi's office, tried to cover up the fact that that was actually captured on the Sanford Police Department's video camera as they frog marched him upstairs to question him after the event occurred. And so and we had a candidate that was running for office, for state office in that district, who took an immediate public position that Zimmerman had to be locked up and the key thrown away. The other thing that they tried to do was whitewash this guy, claim that he was white, and he shot Zimmerman. And of course, the argument was he's a racist asshole. He shot him because he was black. Okay. The truth is Zimmerman's Hispanic. It's not exactly white. He's brown. All right. Bondi continued to press this prosecution. Ultimately, he was acquitted. So ultimately, they tried to throw him in prison for something, for self-defense, and failed. But Bondi's actions were outrageous misconduct, in my opinion. And there was enough of it. I've spent an awful lot of time going through it because it was a huge point of debate within the party, within the state party. And ultimately, I put a motion on the table which passed to disavow that candidate. So we actually censured one of our own political candidates running for office in that district. Now, that's a pretty extraordinary remedy, all right? I mean, it's as far as you can go as a party. You can't actually force somebody off your ballot. But we disavowed a candidate for office on the basis that he wanted to jail somebody without due process of law, which, I mean, from my point of view as a political party, you can't allow that. You just can't. That's an un-American kind of thing. And I went to the mat with it and won. So, but as a result of everything that went into this process, I learned quite a bit about Pam Bondi and how she thinks. And I didn't like a bit of it.
Why do you think that was her stance back then? Was she the Attorney General all the way in 2012 in Florida? Or was she at a lower level at that point? I'm trying to look it up while we're talking.
Yeah, I'm not, my suspicion, I mean, this was a very heavily racially charged situation, okay, because Martin was black, okay. And this was, all in the context of, white race war against black people. No. That's not a new song and dance, okay. But Pam Bondi also, as far as I could tell, had a serious hard-on for people having the right to stand their ground. She didn't like the stand your ground law. Didn't believe it, and was there was a lot of debate over that when that was passed too. But she didn't like it. But even without the stand your ground law, in this particular situation, as the evidence stood all the way from the beginning of the case, Zimmerman really had no choice. He was going to die if he did not shoot him. And so, I mean, there's one thing to lose a fight. You get into a fist fight with somebody, one of your wins, one of your loses, you get knocked down. Okay. But at the point that the person who beat you gets on top of you and, essentially is pounding your head against a cement sidewalk, that's assault with intent to commit murder, and you've lost, okay? You're not in a position to fight back at that point. So that's not a fight anymore. Now we have gone into the realm of force that is intended to cause great bodily injury or death. And if there is under any set of circumstances a reason to use defensive force that is deadly, it's there.
This episode is brought to you by Vaulted. Launched by McIlvaney Financial Group, with Vaulted, I literally just tap a button and I own physical gold stored in a professional vault. Vaulted is offering all of my listeners $50 of free gold when you click on my sign-up link. They have a tool called Vault Plan that allows you to passively add your gold position every month. Just activate it for 6 months and you will get $50 of free gold in your account. Click on the promo link in the show notes or go to vaulted.blbvux.net/coffeeandamike. I looked up while you're talking. So she was the Attorney General from 2011 to 2019 in Florida.
Yeah.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So I mean, this was the background, and this was, as far as I was concerned, this was a pure railroading for political and race reasons. That's all it was. It had nothing to do with the facts. And an attorney general is supposed to be primarily concerned with the facts. Not with the optics, not with the politics, the facts. And it was, I mean, unless there had been some set of facts that demonstrated that, in fact, I mean, all the things that happened prior to Martin mounting him, at the point that he does that, doesn't matter. Okay, whether there was, are you justified in shooting somebody over a fight? Generally, no. But if you get into a fight and the other guy pulls a tire iron, and this is that kind of a situation. And Zimmerman had injuries on the back of his head that were consistent with what he told the police at the time he was originally arrested. So it wasn't a difficult call at that point to say, okay, we can investigate this, and you have to, because there is a person who is dead. However, on the evidence, at this particular juncture, this is a lawful defensive shooting.
So I don't think people realize, and thank you for sharing that aspect, because I know you've touched on it, but you going into greater detail about it, because I don't think, and people that are going to listen to this, I don't think they realize this story from Pam Bondi's past. Now, you knowing that and going through this and experiencing it and following it, what was your take then when she was appointed as the Attorney General for the United States?
I wrote an article on it, and Trump is well aware of this and was well aware of it at the time he appointed her. So he had absolutely no business doing it. And she had demonstrated that, she never apologized for this. There was no restitution given to Zimmerman for the malicious prosecution. You get acquitted, you don't get your attorney's fees paid by the state when they lose on something that is clearly wrong. All right, you got prosecuted, you beat them. By the way, that's pretty rare for you to beat a prosecution like that. All right.
And the financial ruins that he must be in. So what happened? And I didn't mean to cut you off, but what happened to him? He just kind of disappear, or is he still in that area?
No, so don't get me wrong. His record is not exact. We're talking about periods of driven snow here for everybody involved. Okay, the guy. There's all sorts of other things that happened before and since. But the fact of the matter is that he'd never been convicted of a felony. He had every right to possess the firearm. All right. Is he a great guy? No, I wouldn't say that. I wouldn't say that at all. But that's not the point. I don't care what the previous circumstances are. He was lawfully in possession of the weapon. And at the time, he was being beaten to death against a piece of concrete. And so, this is one of the things when you start talking about people in the context of an action that happens, not with premeditation, certainly, you don't premeditate somebody knocking you over, getting on top of you, and pounding your head against the sidewalk. That's, you don't premeditate that kind of a circumstance coming up. Uh, you have to start at that instant in time with the evaluation. And as far as I was concerned, it was a cut and dried situation. It was a cut and dried case. And Pam Bondi saw the opportunity to score political points.
Did he disappear though, or is he still?
No, he didn't. There was another. He got into some other kind of minor trouble after that. There was. I mean, I don't know what's happened in the 15 years since, 10 years.
No, I was just
plus
curious. What if he just kind of?
But there was. Well, he showed up back in the news about 3, 4 years later, and then disappeared again. But I was focused on it at the time, and from my perspective, that was what mattered.
And so knowing that Trump was aware of this with her and still appointed her as Attorney General, what are your thoughts? What were your thoughts then, and what are they now? Because her name is circulating around, in relation to Epstein. So I cut you off when you were.
Yeah. So it's not just Epstein. Okay. So here's the other problem. When he appointed her, one of the things that he said he was going to do when he brought Homan in with regards to ICE and DHS and the illegals, he was going to enforce the law. That's what he said, right? That was the promise, that he was going to enforce the law.
Basic things, right? Like not asking for too much, like just.
Okay. Well, guess what? Since the 1950s, there is a law that's been on the books, 8 U.S.C. 1324, which says bringing in, harboring, employing illegal immigrants, where you either know or with reckless disregard do so, okay, which would not just involve employment, but it would involve renting somebody an apartment with reckless disregard for the fact that they're illegal, or knowing that they're illegally present in the United States. That's harboring. You're giving them a place to live. Providing them public benefits or private benefits. All right. I mean, all these different nonprofits that hand out, this, that, and the other thing. Whatever kind of business and other arrangements. It's a criminal offense. It carries a 10-year prison sentence. If the illegal immigrant commits a crime that results in bodily injury to an American, it's 20 years in prison. And if they commit an offense that results in the death of an American, or actually the way the law is written is any person, so even if they kill another illegal immigrant, if they commit an act that results in the death of another person, and you have provided material aid and comfort to those people, you get life in prison. You've committed a life felony by assisting that illegal immigrant. In addition to that, if you transport an illegal immigrant, the conveyance that you used is subject to forfeiture. So, bus, airplane, okay. These laws have been on the books since the 1950s. If you want to actually solve the problem of all these illegal immigrants, you go start arresting employers and landlords. When Trump was in office during his first term, you might remember a girl in Iowa that was killed by an illegal Mexican. The murderer, and I can call him that because he's been convicted, was living on the farm of a very heavily involved GOP donor. Under 8 U.S.C. 1324, that man is supposed to be sitting in prison for the rest of his natural life because he harbored and provided aid and comfort to an illegal alien who committed an act of murder, and he was convicted of the murder. That happened during Trump's first term. Where's the arrest? How about the guy who killed the girl, the college young woman down in Georgia? Where's the arrest? Somebody owns that apartment building he was living in. They knew he was illegally here in the United States, along with his brother, who was also illegally here in the United States. Hell, he tried to get a job at UGA, and they bounced him because he was an illegal immigrant. He committed murder. You want this problem to go away? You can solve it in an afternoon. Now, the meatpacking plant in Omaha is a different case. Why? Because they actually ran E-Verify. And the illegal immigrants that were there were using forged identification. So therefore, that employer probably cannot be tagged because it was not with either knowledge or reckless disregard. They, in fact, took reasonable steps to ascertain that these people had lawful authorization to work in the United States. They were defrauded by the illegal immigrants, but they themselves were not involved. Okay, I'm all right with that. But that's 5% of the problem. Look at what just happened with this pot farm out in California. They just busted a whole ton of illegal immigrants out there. Do you really think you really think the people that run that place ran E-Verify on all those employees? Of course they didn't. One of them, by the way, apparently was wanted for a very serious criminal offense. We don't have the jackets on the rest of them, but they caught one that was. All right. So how come the people that run that place weren't all arrested? Why aren't they all in the dock? Where's Pam Bondi? Pam Bondi, I'm going to enforce the law. No, I'm only going to enforce the laws that I want to enforce for political purposes, and the ones that I don't for political purposes, I won't. Which is exactly what she did in Florida.
But she's taking orders from the top.
Is she? Or were her orders originally something that did Trump choose her because she was willing to go after somebody for political purposes in Florida? She failed, but she tried.
What were your thoughts then when she was, all over the news doing the circuit, right when the new administration got ushered in, and she's like, I got the files, they're sitting on my desk.
Michael, last year, 2024, Wired published a story in which they managed to get their hands on the data set, cell phone tracking data, the ping data from towers, from an organization, a company, that also has substantial contacts and contracts with government law enforcement agencies. They mapped the people coming and going from Little St. James, from pedophile Rape Island, with enough specificity that in a number of cases they were able to identify people's individual residences. Gee, that tends to happen when you've got a palatial estate on 5 acres of land, and by the way, the geolocation from cell towers isn't all that precise, but it's precise enough to know that it's that house and not the next one over, because they're far enough apart. Okay. Wired ran this story. This is now public information. Pam Bondi claimed to have gigabytes of video evidence, which said will never be released because it's all child pornography. Well, if it's child pornography, how do you make child pornography? Well, you need to have a child, and then you need to have somebody doing something sexually to the child, typically an adult. We don't know who the adult is? Bull. Then you go back a little further. JP Morgan and Deutsche Bank both paid out huge settlements to roughly 200 victims who were children and are now adults. Epstein's estate paid out roughly $150 million. So that's $500 million. And this is only to people who were willing to come forward and waive their right to sue. But that number was 200. So you're telling me that I'm supposed to believe that Epstein personally raped all 200 of those kids? Bullshit. And further, Ghislaine Maxwell is doing 20 years in prison. She was convicted of trafficking children. Who were the children trafficked to? She's in jail. Oh, but there's nothing to see here. The hell there's not. All right? You have two major banks that forked up over $100 million, and you have the estate of the decedent who died under suspicious circumstances while in jail awaiting trial, that has paid out over close to $150 million to 200 victims, roughly $750,000 per person on average. And that's just of the kids who, one, didn't kill themselves over this, and two, were willing to stand up and waive their right to do anything about it in the future in order to get the money. And that number is 200 people who were children at the time. And you're telling me that this creep, and by the way, the whole reason the banks got in trouble was because under suspicious activity report laws, they had every reason to know that what was going on, they didn't do anything about it. That's why they got tagged. So, but there's nothing to see here? Or is this just like Martin and Zimmerman, except on a much grander scale? Which is that we know exactly who they are because we happen to have all the cell phone tracking data, the same data that Wired got their hands on. We know exactly who it is. And if we do this, the entire political edifice in the United States, and probably in some other countries as well, goes kaboom boom. Because guess what? For every one of those 200 kids, somebody did an evil thing.
And you have to think that the number is much higher than the 200.
Of course it is. Yeah. But the estimates are 1,000.
It's probably higher than that too, don't you think?
I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I do know is this. No nation that is willing to suborn the rape of children for political purposes deserves to survive. That's the end of the conversation from my perspective.
And you've heard the argument where people say, well, the whole political system, the economic system could collapse if the list were to come out. And
I don't care.
Yeah.
I don't care. Blow it all to hell right now.
Who wants to live in a system like that? And where are people's hard lines? If children are not the hard line here, then fuck you. Not you literally, Karl, but
you know what, Michael? If somebody had done that to my daughter, everyone that I could touch that was involved in it would be dead. I would kill them all. And yeah, they'd get me. That's okay. You're not getting away with it. Especially not with what we see as the way this is being treated.
So let me ask you two things then. What is your impression of Kash Patel and Dan Bongino? And before you answer that, in relation to when, they did that Fox News interview, them sitting together saying what they said.
So Bongino, in particular, I suspect is well aware of the Wired story. Kash Patel um, has to be presumed to have access to the data. He's already seen it. So he knows what it is. And Bongino probably has at this point as well. I don't give a crap who gets taken down by this. Okay, it doesn't make any difference. This is not, and I don't care how long ago it was either. It makes absolutely no difference. I mean, yes, it was, a number of years ago. So what? I don't care. I want every single person that was involved in it, everyone that's been identified, every one of them is named, and every prosecutable felony is prosecuted. And those that are barred by the statute of limitations, those people are outed anyway. All of it public, every last bit of it. I don't give a shit whether, if you can't bring the charges because the statute of limitations on whatever it is run. Now, in most cases, that's not going to be true in this sort of circumstance. But let's assume it is for some of those events. Fine. It doesn't prevent you from publishing their names and the events of what you have evidence. It doesn't prevent you from doing that at all.
Why are they doing a complete 180 on this, Karl? In your opinion?
Well, when this all started, my suspicion, so my first question, whenever something really hinky starts going on, is chase the money. Because behind every scam is a check. Okay. I mean, airplanes cost money to fly. Islands cost money to purchase. This guy had a burn rate that was in the tens of millions of dollars, if not over 100 million a year. I mean, running a private island, not to mention all the fuel and the 3 pilots that are necessary to fly a 727, because that's the mechanical jet. It requires 3 people. The engines you have a flight engineer on there that's actually operating the engines. Unlike today's jets that are, push a button and the engine starts. Well, they don't work that way on a 727. So you're paying 3 professional pilots. You're paying for fuel. By the way, the 727 was taken out of service primarily because, number one, it's very noisy. And number 2, it's thirsty. It eats dead dinosaurs at a prodigious rate. So, the guy does not stick fuel in your tank unless you pay him. And that plane consumes fuel at an utterly outrageous rate of use. And on top of that, unless you have something really odd going on, there's absolutely no reason for you to do that. If you've got a lot of money and you're a rich executive, you buy a Learjet or a Cessna Citation or something like that to get around in. Why? Because it's a tenth of the size, it burns far less fuel, and it only needs 1 pilot. All right. So there's a bunch of hinky crap that's involved in this. Okay. I mean, Lears certainly existed during the period of time in question. It was, but I mean, hell, the plane was called the Lolita Express, for crying out loud. That was its vernacular name. So, I mean, give me a break. Everyone knew what the hell was going on. My opinion, I think the CIA and Mossad were the financial funnel. I think both of them were involved in it. The CIA may not have been personally involved, but they knew about it. And it's a tool of control.
So is that why you think Trump is trying to just make this go away, lashing out at reporters for asking the questions, blaming the Democrats?
I think look, if the funding chain goes back to Israel, and it probably does, my opinion, probably does. I mean, Mossad is the best at what they do in the world. And, are they above this? I doubt it. That could very easily be the end of popular support for anything that Israel wants to do in connection to the United States. Absolutely over within a day. Now, what is the possibility that Ukraine's also entwisted in this? Very real, very possible. This was during the period of time. Remember, this, what led to all this getting started was Maidan over there in Ukraine. Okay, that was the popular uprising that led to all this. We were involved in that up to our necks. John McCain personally was over there giving speeches. We essentially overthrew it was corrupt, but we overthrew the Ukrainian government for all intents and purposes. It's part of our statecraft bullshit. Would I be surprised if our own State Department was involved in this up to their necks? No, not even slightly.
He wanted to go away. Do you think it's going to go away, Karl? Do you think?
No, I don't. Most of the time when it comes to political scandals, you kind of got, you look at, for example, what happened with Watergate, okay, with Richard Nixon. I'm not even convinced Nixon personally knew about, at the time, in advance, or authorized the break into the Watergate Hotel. I mean, I've looked at that in some depth, just as an academic study from a political history perspective. I'm not convinced that he knew about it in advance. I'm not convinced he authorized it. And I'm certainly not convinced that he wanted it. From a practical matter, he had no reason to do it. He was winning going into the election. What political motivation did he have? Okay. Now, there were a bunch of other people that had political motivations to go into there, but not him personally. All related to the Vietnam War and the things that were related to it. But Nixon himself, in terms of his political aspirations and in terms of being reelected as president, he was winning in a landslide. And in fact, he did win in a landslide. So what was his reason to do this? However, once he became aware of it, he did try to cover it up. I mean, that's established, right? And it blew up his presidency. Now, the interesting thing about that decision is that if he had destroyed the tapes instead of altering them, he probably would have survived the political firestorm. Because nobody could have demonstrated what was on them. They were gone. If he literally had destroyed them, completely gone, then they subpoena him and say, fuck you, I burned him. I don't think they would have had the votes to impeach him. They might have tried anyway, but I think they would have failed. But then, once they did start doing that, then he starts firing people. All right, and it was one after another. My attorney general. Well, you say after F you, get out. Then the next guy, get out. And then, once you start going down that road, now the votes start to line up on the other side of the table, and that's exactly what happened. And I mean, the reason he resigned was that he was essentially told that there were 60 votes in the Senate to eject him. He was going to lose, and that's why he quit.
So let me back up a second. Why, coming back to Bongino, Patel, and Bondi, especially particular Bongino, I had my friend Matt Smith and I were talking about this yesterday, and I asked him, why would Bongino, why take this job? You had a show on Rumble, you're making a lot of money. Same with Patel. Like, Patel's been in government, Bondi's been in government. Why take these positions knowing what you're walking into? Or do you think they didn't know?
Well, I think Bondi knew damn well what she was doing, and I think
you covered that, yeah.
Yeah, I don't have any doubt there that given her history, absolutely nothing surprises me out of what she's done. None. All right. Uh, Bongino and Patel, on the other hand, I suspect they were told and they believed that they were going to come in and do the job. And that because of the representations that Trump made during the campaign, remember one of them was that the Epstein stuff was going to all be released. So was the Kennedy stuff. Okay, that both of those were going to be that no more of this bullshit redaction crap where you get a piece of paper and it's 99% black, right? No more of that garbage. It's all coming out. The hell with it. Whoever it burns, it burns. That's too bad. Maybe you shouldn't have diddled the little girl. I think both Patel and Bongino believed that in fact was going, and by the way, on the illegal immigrants, that Trump was serious about throwing them all out. Then he meant it. And I mean, that's what he told us. Look, I voted for him in no small part because of the economic dislocation that was coming from that 20 million people that are here that have no legal right to be in the United States, and the demand pressure that it places on the economy and what that's doing to prices, along with the budget deficit, some of which is in the medical sector, but it's also everywhere else. Now, is solving that a complete solution to the problem? No, not at all. But is it the correct answer, given the fact that the United States, like every other country, has a limited set of resources, and we have to choose where we spend them, and that we should spend them on citizens and lawful permanent residents exclusively? Yes. And did he promise he was going to do that? Yes. And if Bongino and Patel believed that they were going to actually come into office and execute on that, well, there you are. Now, did did Trump essentially take Bongino out back, tie him down, and cut his nuts off after he got him to give up a highly profitable venture, being out there as a commentator? Well, if I was him, I'd be more than a little pissed, don't you think?
Well, it wasn't his. I never was a regular watcher of his show, but from people I spoke to who watch him religiously, I got the receipts. I got the receipts. He wrote books about this. But here's the thing, Karl. Why not? Why isn't he out now then? Why wouldn't he leave and say, fuck this and I'm out?
I think because I don't think at this point the decision point. So part of the problem with political intrigue like this, okay, the whole bonding, and it all centers on bonding when you get down to it. Someone's going to win, somebody's going to lose on this, but I don't think it's been determined yet who that's going to be. Ultimately, my opinion is that if Trump does not either fire Bondi or force her to release all of the information, whoever it kills, tough shit. If it destroys the United States relationship with Israel, Ukraine, or both, tough shit. If it ends up with 50 State Department high-level people being indicted, tough shit. If Bill Gates is on video poking a 10-year-old kid, tough shit. Okay, they all go into jail. If he doesn't go there, and they try to do what they're trying to do right now, which is whitewash it, I think he loses his base. I think this is a Nixonian situation for him where he's either, and by the way, there's a midterm election coming up, okay, in about another year and a half. He loses both House and Senate in the midterms. The people who voted for him that are his, and these are not I'm not part of his base. I never was. Okay, I didn't believe him the first time around with regards to the promises he made. He was going to resolve the medical problems. He did absolutely none of it. In fact, he was completely full of crap. And, I called that in advance of the election, and then I saw it happen in real time. And so I would, but this time, my option was to, I mean, hey, you can vote third party, and you may as well vote for Cthulhu. So the question was, and I have voted for Cthulhu. Well, the question was I going to make a decision this time on the basis of political promises that were made that I believed would be upheld? Um, well, we'll see if they're upheld. But now here's the acid test. Because as far as I'm concerned, there really isn't much in terms of the legitimacy of a government and a nation that goes beyond diddling kids. I don't have a bigger issue than that.
And Bongino at this point, even if he quit today, how could he go back to his show on Rumble? How could you go back and say I'm speaking for truth? I don't know how you could do that.
Well, he's got a serious problem because if he loses, my suspicion is he's destroyed. Uh, the data that he has,
You talk about Bongino?
yeah,
Yeah.
the data that he has as a result of his position, he cannot take with him. If he does and releases it, he'll go to prison.
But how can you even sell the idea of like I'm about truth? I have the receipts. You can't go back to your show. You had an opportunity and you didn't do it.
Well, exactly. And so, I mean, in a sense, he's trapped. Okay. But the only reason I can see that he hasn't quit, which is all he's got left to try to save face. Okay. I mean, save. I hope he's got enough money stashed to be able to sit around and suck Mai Tais for the rest of his life if he walks off. Maybe he does. I don't know. Um, but like I said, at this point, I don't think the fight's over. Okay, in terms of who's going to win that, I think Trump. I don't know who gave Trump the idea that he could play this, especially this thing that showed up on Truth Social. Well, I mean, this is not going to come out instantly, but it showed up this morning. At least I saw it this morning. That this whole thing is a Democrat hoax. What in the hell are you smoking, sir? Okay. I mean, are you telling me that what Wired published, that's a hoax? The $500 million that was paid out by the estate and by two large major financial institutions, international financial institutions, that's a hoax? The 200 identified former children, now adults, who came forward and were paid, that's a hoax? What are you smoking? And oh, by the way, the alleged video from the jail that was released has been tampered with. I don't, did the people that did the tampering, were they hired by the same folks that Barack Obama hired to tamper with the so-called photograph of the birth certificate? Which incidentally got me a whole lot of people pissed off when I just happen to be somebody that's done photographic manipulation and design for, at that point, it had been 25 years. Took, the whole reason I got involved in that controversy was that I had a former competitor and now a friend sent me that file. I woke up one morning, I get on my computer, there it is. I took a look at it. And I said, oh, that's bullshit. I called the guy up and I said, dude, I've known you for a hell of a long time. What kind of a joke is this that you're trying to run on me? But I figured he'd done it because, among other things, as a competitor, he ran a graphic design shop. Okay. I said, what kind of bullshit are you trying to run here? And he says, no, seriously, that's what the AP and these other guys published. I said, come on, you tampered with this. He's like, no, seriously, go back to the source and grab the file yourself if you think I fucked with it. And yet there is this supposed video has been brought into Adobe's Premiere and edited. And it's got the metadata in the file to prove it. Now, what was done? I don't know. But it's not a straight dump out of the cameras. Just like the birth certificate was not a photograph. It was digitally edited. I don't know what was digitally edited, but it was edited. And the same thing's true here.
Too many people are giving Trump a pass with everything. And I'm getting tired of it, Karl. Like I really, somebody messaged me. They probably have his family threatening his family. I'm just like, I don't believe that. I personally, I don't think his name is on this list.
Well, okay, so I don't believe it's not about being on the list, okay? It's that it is publicly known that Trump did throw Epstein out of his club. And he did it because he suspected the guy was a creep. And I mean, that's not retrospective look back. That was reported at the time. Now, okay, did he have actual evidence the guy was a creep? Doesn't matter. I mean, we've all heard the thing, you see the white van going down the street with the free candy sign on the side of it. You don't actually have to see a kid get inside to know what somebody's thinking, right? I mean, so, okay. But who else does he now know is implicated that is important to him? Well, that's a different question, right? What if it's one of his family members? It's not impossible. Awful lot of very rich and powerful people were on that island.
One of his close colleagues. I mean, it could be endless scenarios.
It's endless possibilities. Endless possibilities. And my guess, and frankly, the reality is I'm sure it's not one. I'm sure it's more like 50. All right, go find that Wired article. It's like, the big blob of red dots, right? Not one or two.
Where does this go from here then, in your view?
Well, we'll see who wins. Okay, either Bondi is forced to release the information, unredacted, or she quits. I mean, that's the other positive. Well, Trump could fire her too, for that matter. He has the authority to do that. That was not questionable. He could kick her to the curb. And the problem, of course, then is now he has to atone for that. Who's he bring in her place? I have no idea. But I don't see how this gets resolved with any credibility within the government unless either Patel and Bongino quit or Bondi quits or the data gets released. And if Bondi quits, then the data gets released after that. If Patel and Bongino quit, then my suspicion is that Trump's base evaporates. It's gone. And that's the end of the Republican Party. You're going to have a communist. Maybe not communist. Communist might be too strong a word, but you're going to have a communist as a president in another 3.5 years. They're not just going to lose the House and Senate in a year and a half. They're going to lose the presidency. The GOP's finished. They're done as a party. I don't think this is going to go away. And you've got an awful lot of people. I mean, it's, people, it's a lot of people use MAGA as a derisive term. Well, I got news for you. There's an awful lot of people that are rather strong in their religious beliefs that are absolutely not going to sit for a political party that suborns the rape of children. And that's the end of the conversation for them. They're not going to hold their nose and vote for the party that let that go on. They're just not going to do it. They're going to stay home. They won't vote for the communists, but they will stay home.
Are you surprised that the left, the CNNs and the MSNBCs, CNBCs are not going after this more? Because I'm not seeing the aggressiveness that I thought I would have saw.
No, and that's because an awful lot of those rich and powerful people are probably patrons. And like I said, I mean, you put this out, you're going to burn a lot of people, okay, on both sides of the aisle. I don't think this is primarily Democrats or Republicans. I think it's both. I think it's also a bunch of career bureaucrats that are way up there, probably within the State Department. Also, almost certainly includes an awful lot of extremely wealthy business people. I mean, there's rumors that, marriages that have gone on for decades have been ended over this. A lot of, I mean, there's a lot of stuff. The original flight log black book has been out there for a long time, right? Now, being on a plane doesn't prove that you did anything illegal. But after the original bust that Epstein had happened in Florida, which, by the way, the punishment he was given was essentially a slap on the wrist for that. Okay, it wasn't until the feds got involved that things got serious for him. But it had been going on for a long time, even at that point. Okay, I mean, it took quite a while before he actually got busted in Florida. But anybody that had anything to do with that guy after that happened knew who this guy was. You're hanging out with a guy that got busted for screwing little kids in Florida? Whether he did 20 years for it or whether he got a slap on the wrist or not, the fact of the matter is that he got busted for diddling little kids.
What's your take, as we spent the last hour talking about this, on the Trump administration now?
Well, he's got a problem economically too. So remember, we had a bunch of promises that were made regarding how much money the tariffs were going to bring in. And the truth is not bearing that out. The last month MTS, I mean, what's customs duties so far this year? I mean, is it way higher than it was when Biden was president? Yeah, it is. But remember, we heard it was going to be like $1 trillion, right? No, it's not. Okay. Not even close. All right. I mean, is $20 billion a month a big number? Yeah, it's meaningful. Is it $1 trillion a year? Well, I can do math. I think you can probably do math. No, it isn't. We were told that Navarro just came out with his op-ed. Fox News, of course, being a right-wing publication, lapped up everything and being anything that's pro-business, they'll print it. Navarro said that during Trump's first term, that the tax cuts and other things, policy changes, resulted in the U.S. economy booming, and that was why it boomed. Well, that was a flat-out lie. The fact of the matter is that the GDP is measured in dollars. The deficit spending by the federal government under Trump's administration, and I left 2020 out of the analysis because, of course, that was a pandemic. That's an externality, and you really can't charge that one way or another for or against him, okay, and the response. But you can charge everything prior to that to him. So you got the 3 years in front of it. And if you take a look at that, um, there was a 15% cumulative improvement in GDP over those 3 years. However, uh, better than half of it was just deficit spending by the federal government, an increase in federal debt. Now, the rest of it should have been absorbed by productivity improvement, which means that the net on net, the economy didn't improve at all. We just printed money. And his Treasury Department, which is his, because he's president, was responsible for it. Now, does that mean that Biden was better? No, Biden did the same damn thing. But the idea that somehow you can keep doing this and then represent to the American public that this was some great thing and therefore we should do more of it, when in fact, no, that isn't what happened. That's not an opinion, that's a lie. And yet, here we are with, the big, beautiful barf.
Bankruptcy bill.
Yeah, well, the bankruptcy, big bankruptcy barf, okay, or a big barfing bankruptcy, or you can probably come up with a bunch of other nasty words too. Um, the basic problem, I mean, just look at what's going on right now. You have screaming in the Senate that we're going to do what? What is it? 6 billion in rescissions or 9 billion in rescissions? That's not even like pissing into a hurricane when you got nearly $2 trillion worth of deficits being racked up a year. Okay, I mean, you're telling me that you got $1,800 billion worth of deficit being racked up and you're going to have a pissy fit over 9?
And yet
what are you smoking?
And yet people will say to you, Karl, or have said to me, well, we got to start somewhere. I'm like, you just don't fucking get it. You don't get it.
It's like I said this morning in the column that I published. If you're $500 in the hole every month, and that's you're digging the hole bare every month, okay, and you change it so you're only $499 in the hole this month, it is true that you improved your situation, okay, that is the truth. However, you're not going to start getting back towards being able to climb out of the hole until you get rid of the entire 500 and go some amount in the other direction. Some amount. Even if it's $1, you're not making it better. And worse at a slower rate is still worse.
I'm going to make a prediction, and you tell me your thoughts on it, or a statement. I think by the end of this term, I think people are going to be so disenfranchised. I don't want to use the word demoralized, but disenfranchised with this administration that you will barely even see him by the end. I hope I'm wrong, by the way, but that's
no. I don't know that we get that far before. I mean, it's the fiscal problem at this point. Okay, just before we came on the air, there was this kerfluffle. The market took a huge dump and then it recovered. I mean, it was, in percentage terms, it wasn't large. It was a big red candle. I was sitting here watching and going, what the hell was that? Well, what it was that there was a thing floated that he was going to fire Powell because Powell has allegedly mismanaged the renovations at the Federal Reserve building. Okay, now, that allegation facially appears to be correct, that he has in fact allowed a tremendous amount of cost overrun and other sort of bullshit with regards to these renovations. Now, how many of those renovations needed to be done? Probably most of them. All right, the Eccles building is old. I mean, my understanding is it still has asbestos insulation around the pipes in the basement. Right? I mean, that shit should have been gotten out of there 40 years ago, and it's not. Does that stuff need to be done? Absolutely. Is there anything that anyone ever negotiates in government where they are fixed cost and by the way, you can't shove the overages up the taxpayer's ass? No. Should Powell have allowed that to happen? No. Can he be fired for doing it? probably because being fired for cause and mismanagement is in fact legitimate. But then the market takes a header, and a few minutes later, Trump, there's another thing out of the White House. No, I'm not going to fire him. And it recovers. So basically, this was, let's see which way the wind blows, right? No, you didn't like the way the wind blew, the market went down. All right, we're not going to do that. The stuff with illegals is the same problem. Okay? Same thing with the medical stuff. Right? You have 100-plus-year-old laws. You can solve the medical considerations, the medical spend problems in a day. You start throwing people in prison for violating 15 United States Code Chapter 1, which, by the way, they are. Pretty easy to prove case. And if the insurance companies and medical companies try to claim that the law doesn't apply, they already tried that in the 1970s and 1980s. They lost twice at the Supreme Court. So they've got nowhere to go legally trying to defend what they've been doing. So this is a facially easy, I mean, as easy as any trial ever is, right? I mean, charging people and locking them up is never completely easy. It takes time, it takes resource, it takes dedication. But what's going to happen to all of the medically related stocks if you do that? They're all going to take headers. All right, but like I pointed out in another interview and in a column, and I've been hammering on this for the last 3 or 4 weeks. Let's say that I like to drink adult beverages every day. Okay, now not a lot of them, not enough to wreck my liver or become an alcoholic. And I'm also social. Most most humans are social to some extent. Okay, so every day I go to the bar and I find a local place that has some people I like, and I have 2 beers. And because I'm of modest means, those 2 beers plus a tip cost $10. Okay, maybe they're, maybe I drink Miller Lights, okay, or whatever. Now, not fancy stuff, but I hang out with some friends, I have a couple of beers, I socialize, and I do this every day. This cost me $3,650 a year to do, right? Because it's 365 days. And I can pay for this. I have a decent job, I can afford it. Now you make everybody in the country buy bar insurance. And you force the taxpayers to pay for anybody who can't afford it. All right. So now let's assume that I'm still only going to have 2 drinks. Because again, I don't want to become an alcoholic. I don't want to destroy my liver. I don't want to die. But I do want to enjoy the company of the other people in the establishment. I'm going to immediately develop a very strong taste for single malt scotch. And those 2 drinks are now $80. Why? Because I don't have to pay for it. I can make you pay for it. And as soon as that happens, the waitress in the bar sees her income go up by a factor of 8, because tips, of course, are a percentage. The bar owner sees his income go up by a factor of 8, and assuming that the profit margin on the scotch is the same as it is on the beer, he makes a hell of a lot more money. The liquor distributor loves this because he sells a lot more booze instead of cheaper beer. And the guy who actually makes the single malt scotch loves it because his demand for scotch goes to the moon, as opposed to when people have to actually pay for it out of their own wallet. And within a very short period of time, employment in that sector explodes higher. The waitress doesn't have to live in a crappy apartment with 3 other people for $1,000 a month. Now she can afford a $400,000 house. What happens if you turn that back off? Every single one of those people is going to tell you you're going to kill people. And within a matter of weeks to months, you have just created an entrenched, forced cost shift that everybody will squeal like a stuck pig if it's reversed. Anybody that thinks that if we enforce this law, say, for example, Eliquis is one of the examples that I've had chief on stocks and jocks bring up before, $7,000 a year roughly in the United States without insurance. In Germany, it's $700 a year. Not just Germany, most of the EU countries are about the same. You can also buy it from a pharmacy in India, by the way, it's made there, for 60 cents a pill. Literally, $60 for 100 tablets. They're not losing money selling it in Germany, or they wouldn't sell it there at all. And they're not losing money selling it in India either, because nobody intentionally sells things at retail at a loss on a constant basis. If you do that, you go out of business. So why is it $7,000 in the United States? Because you can force someone else to pay the bill. And if you stopped that, if you started throwing people in jail that did it, would the people who needed that drug die? No. Because if I'm the drug manufacturer, my choices are, how many people can afford $7,000 a year? Yeah, $7,000 a year. Well, basically zero, especially among senior citizens. Right, how many people can actually pay that price? Pretty much no one. 1% maybe of the people that prescribed it. I mean, this is a very popular drug. This thing's used by 3 or 4 million people in the United States. So if you didn't drop the price, if you kept it at $7,000, you would basically sell none of it and you'd go out of business. Because you've got all these manufacturing plants to make the thing. You can't sell any of it. You go out of business. That's the end of the conversation. So your other option is charge $700 for it a year, 1/10 of today's price. Most of the seniors can pay that out of their pocket off their Social Security income. But your profits go down. But it is profitable. So what happens to your stock price? It crashes. But it doesn't go zero. Company doesn't go under. This is true for every single medical good and commodity and all the services. If you do this, who gets screwed? Oh, well, all the people that don't actually provide care. All the billing clerks, all the pharmacy benefit managers people, all the insurance company executives, all the insurance company employees. You don't need any of that. All those people get fired. And they squeal like stuck pigs, just like the waitress will if you let me have my single malt scotch and not have to pay for it out of my own pocket.
So do you think by the end of this term, do you agree with what my forecast is, or where do you?
I think it's worse. I think it's way worse. We either stop this now, or you're going to see a revolt within the marketplace of some form, because you can't cut rates into this kind of an environment when you have a 7%. Right now, we're running a 6.7% fiscal deficit.
What kind of revolt, Karl, do you see? Like physical?
Possibly. An asset price crash, a business fold back, and history says that there is the very real possibility of a no bullshit revolt, a real one.
Like you're talking physical like kinetic conflict.
I'm talking about the kind of thing you can't turn off once it starts. Problem with civil conflicts is that they're kind of like a dog that lives in a rural area and kills a chicken. Normally dogs guard the flock, right? But you get one that kills a chicken and it decides it likes it. From that point onward, every time that dog sees a chicken, it considers that's food and it's pleasurable. And your only options are going to be to shoot the dog or rehome it to somebody who lives in a city where there are no chickens. Therefore, it'll never see one again for the rest of its life. You can't break it of that habit. Civil conflicts, once they start, people just decide they like killing. It's not about them being pissed at somebody because of their religion or their political beliefs or anything else. They just enjoy doing it. Those don't stop until people get tired of killing. There isn't a resolution to them that is resolved by, saying, well, let's fix this or that. Doesn't happen. And there's 1,000 years of history that points out that this is exactly the kind of thing that happens. You look at Bosnia and what happened over there.
Well, we've seen, sorry, go ahead.
People say that can't happen in the United States. They're wrong. It can.
Well, even look at over the last month. I mean, you had the fires in Idaho that were started intentionally, where this person was shooting at the firefighters. You have the ICE agents down in Texas.
You just had a bunch of people who showed up down in Texas. They fired fireworks, basically mortars, at the building to essentially con the agents from coming out of the building. They did, and then they started shooting at them.
So you think the potential is there for a larger scale of what we're seeing right now?
I do. I think it's very possible. And the thing is that it's kind of like a Hatfield and McCoy kind of thing. Okay, once it gets started, they don't even know why they're going after the other guy anymore. They just know they enjoy it. You don't want that in the you don't want that anywhere. I don't care. There's no romantic way. There's no way to romanticize that kind of a situation if it happens. All right, that is. But you know what? If we can't realistically have a country where people who rape children go to prison, and we can cover this up for political purposes and it's considered okay, we deserve it. As a nation, we all deserve it if we allow that to go on.
And we have.
We have, and we are today, right now.
Well, even
that's the marker I think Trump needs to put on the table. He needs to come out. He needs to have one of those fireside chat kinds of things like Carter did. Except he needs to say, "Yeah, I know this is going to screw a lot of people, but we cannot have a country. We do not deserve to have a nation where the sexual abuse of children for political purposes is considered acceptable, excusable, or can be covered up. Period. It's not negotiable. It is a fundamental reality that without a next generation, you don't have anything. Children are not political play toys."
Matt and I were talking yesterday. He brought up the Pledge of Allegiance, right? Liberty and justice for all.
Yeah, well, that hasn't been true for a long time. But the thing is, it's one thing for adults to get screwed. It's quite another when you start talking about kids.
Do you see Trump doing this fireside chat or something along those lines? Because I don't, and that's why I'm curious if you're.
I don't know. He's the real. I don't know what flipped his switch in terms of going from it's all coming out to, this is all big conspiracy theory. I don't know. And the other problem he has is that the man has classical indications. I mean, obviously, I'm not a psychiatrist, right? But he has classical indications of being a narcissist. One of the problems with people in that spectrum, if you will, is that they cannot say, I was wrong. They're incapable of it. By putting this on the table that he did on True Social, he now has backed himself into a corner. For him to come out and do that would require that he say, I fucked up. Whether he actually says those words or not, that's what he'd have to do. I don't know that he's psychologically capable of making that statement.
Just like Warp Speed, right? I mean, he's still praising that.
I, you know, I don't know if you saw the thing that Tucker Carlson did with that Japanese guy, the
Uh,
biologist.
Murakami, Professor Murakami.
Yeah,
I had him on my show.
yeah. He,
If it's, we're
I
talking about the
saw,
same guy.
I saw some of his work some time back. I don't know if he's right or not. Okay, but he certainly has the chops to make the statement, which most people that have looked at this stuff don't. All right. The bad part of it is that it lines up with the kind of statistical numbers that I put forward that I was seeing empirically from the data that was in the early studies on the shots. And if so, there is a slow moving train wreck and a catastrophe that is going to continue for 10 or 20 years after we discontinue these things. And at this point, we haven't. Now, thank God, a lot of people have gotten wise to it and aren't taking any more of them.
People are still getting him though, Carl. It's unbelievable.
Well, some people are, but you know what? The mass adoption has gone away. There's an awful lot of people that are very skeptical because a huge percentage of people know someone who has been either seriously injured or killed by them. And there is a critical mass. You know, unfortunately, the problem is that, you know, you stop. Well, you know, how long before you know that you're clear from it? Well, if you never actually clear the spike protein out of your body, the answer is when you're dead. That's not a good thing. Okay. Um, the presence of antibody titers does not tell you this. So, you know, but there is data out there that exactly that is happening, that there is persistence of spike production within the body that, you know, is 2 years after you were infected or 2 years after you took the shot. And that absolutely should not be the case. And we know that you know, there are viruses out there that are archinogenic. So, I mean, you're talking about something that is very likely to give you cancer, if that is the case. And that's what this guy's pointing out, is that this risk is really there. And the mechanism that causes it, the p53 suppression in particular, is a big deal. And he's right about that, because that's exactly how AIDS gets you. That's not some novel theory. That's something that we've known about with HIV, you know, since HIV was studied. So yeah, but I mean, but even today, you've still got Trump running around, warp speed, warp speed. Now, he hasn't said it in quite a while. But see, the problem is, people with his particular personality, he's incapable of saying, I fucked up. So now he's got a problem because he's put this on the table with regards to the Epstein stuff. So for him to actually have that fireside chat would mean he'd have to say, well, I fucked that up, whether he actually says it or not.
You don't think this is going away though? You don't think in a week or two, a month from now, it'll die off?
No, I don't. I there are certain things that don't go away. Okay, you can offend someone's sensibilities to the point that they're just not going to shut up and they're not going to stop. And buggering kids is one of them. I mean, there's not a whole lot of stuff that keeps people's attention in this day and age, as you know. You know, I mean, come on, we live in a TikTok world. If it doesn't fit 15 seconds, it doesn't mean anything. But this one, ooh, I don't know. I don't think so. I just don't think so. This is, I mean, I'm not the right person to ask about attention span on this. I mean, not by any stretch of the imagination, because I've been keyed up on this Epstein thing since, you know, since the first bust in the early part of the 2000s in Florida. But for him to have made it a campaign issue, which he did, elevated it into, and you know, I mean, you're talking about people who are his base. They are, they are soup to nuts, hard scrabble people that live and work in America. They're Americans. Okay, most of them have kids. You put into somebody's mind that their daughter would be raped by some crazy dude. You tell me how you get that out of somebody's head once it gets in there. There's certain things that once you see them, you can't unsee them. That's one of them.
Where can people find you, Karl?
Market-ticker.org. And there is now a contributor program there that gets access to videos and all kinds of other content. There's all sorts of stuff that's behind the screen, so to speak.
As always, enjoy our conversations. I know it won't be too long before we speak again. And, thanks for coming back on.
Anytime. Hey, the flag's still right side up. I haven't given up yet.
Me either.
If you see me flip it over,
I'm not. Well, I mean, anybody who listens to me knows I haven't been optimistic about any of this stuff. So doesn't mean I'm a black pillar and think I don't get out of bed every morning. But if you think the federal government's coming to save you, you're sorely mistaken. And what I said after he got reelected, I didn't have these expectations like things were going to drastically change, and so
yeah.
But we'll see.
Yeah, me either. But I certainly didn't expect some of these things that have happened over the last couple of weeks. Those have been surprises.
Well, it's hard to you're going to have curveballs thrown at you that you never saw coming, and this is one of those things where. But I also, and maybe this was I didn't not care about the Epstein stuff, but I also said, show me something. I'll believe it when I see it. I'll believe it when I see it. Right. And I didn't. It's not that It's not that I didn't think this was important, but I've seen this movie, and I go back
the thing is though is that when he was running this during the campaign, and then Wired ran that story, that I think was once that came out from them. I mean, Wired is a pretty left-leaning organization, okay, in publication. They always have been. Once they came out with that. It took what was an abstract in the context of a presidential campaign and made it concrete, because they actually documented this huge blob of people. This wasn't some rich asshole with an island that, grabbed a kid every 2 months and diddled them. And it wasn't that. It put a whole different face on it for anybody that read that. Anyone that read that article looked at it and go, what the hell?
Do you have that? Do you have that somewhere in your archives that you could send it so I could publish it with this?
Yeah, I can toss it over to you. It's going to actually be in the article. It's going to hit here shortly. I've got one in the queue, but I'll toss it your way when we get off the air. Okay. So you'll have it, and you can throw it up there. Like I said, it's from 2024. It's recent.
Yeah, I'd like to read it, but I know people are going to reach out to me and ask me for the link to that article. So
it's absolutely fascinating. And you know what? And Wired has come back out now, and they're basically they're blowing the whistle on some of this other stuff too. I have to say, a lot of the stuff that they run, I'm like, yeah, okay, maybe true, maybe not all that pertinent, right? This is different. It's different in character. It's different in type. It's just different.
Do you know who the journalist is that wrote it?
Not off the top of my head.
Okay.
Not off the top of my head.
Because maybe that might be somebody might have interest to have him come on here if they're open to it.
Yeah, I don't know. I have no idea what they're. I don't have any contacts within the organization.
I'll look. I mean, the article will have the author on it, I'm sure.
Oh yeah.
So I'll look.
Oh yeah,
I'll look
it's got a byline. Yeah, it's got a byline.
Yeah.
They always do. All right.
Karl, thanks.
Anytime.
Mic drop.
Thank you.